Good morning, and you're all very welcome to another Signpost Series webinar. And I hope you all keep it well in this lovely week. I suppose plenty of sunshine, plenty of red faces, plenty of sunburn going around, but it's great to see it this time of year. And we've another really interesting presentation lined up for you again today. So I'm really looking forward to this one. And I suppose the one thing that we've been talking about a good bit there this year, and it's a really good time for it as well, is biodiversity. Boosting biodiversity on farmland involves creating diverse and healthy ecosystems with agricultural landscapes, benefiting both nature and agriculture, and it can be achieved through various practices, including diversification of crops, protecting and enhancing existing habitats, and adopting sustainable farming methods. And we're delighted to be joined today by Dr. Saorla Kavanagh, Teagasc Research Officer in Farmland Biodiversity. Saorla, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Cathal. I'm great. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. It's wonderful to see the sun shining.
yeah. And where are you based today, Saorla?
So I'm based in Johnstown Castle, but working from Waterford this morning.
Yeah, you're probably about 20 meters away from me at the moment, or maybe more. Um, okay, and we're also joined by Teagasc Countryside Management Specialist, Dr. Keena, who's going to help me out with questions. How are you today, Catherine?
Morning, all well, thank
Yeah,
you.
where are you based today, Catherine?
I'm in Kildalton.
Lovely, lovely. Nice place to be today.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, Sarla, just maybe just for our viewers, and I know people would probably recognize you, but maybe just give us maybe a little bit of a blast of what your research is all about.
Yeah, so I've actually included a few of the slides in my presentation on my role in Teagasc. So currently I'm the Farmland Biodiversity Research Officer. And prior to joining Teagasc, which is just 19 months ago, I was working in the National Biodiversity Data Centre on the Protecting Farmland Pollinators and the Moth Monitoring EIP. And I have various, I suppose the majority of my background will be in pollinator ecology, but my PhD was focused on honey chemistry and how the chemistry of the honey related to the landscape.
That's interesting. Yeah, yeah. So lots and lots to talk about. And I'd say people are going to be looking forward to this presentation, particularly time of year, and there's a lot happening on the biodiversity front, a lot of activity. Just to remind everybody today that we're going to be recording today's session, and do please submit your questions to the Q&A tab. You can also get your questions in, and Catherine's going to be there to help, and Catherine's a hive of information as well, and we'll have a right chat at the end. So, Sarah, maybe if you want to get your slides ready, and we can get you up and running. And just to remind everybody that there is a podcast version of the Signpost Series webinar available to listen to whenever you're on the move to keep you up to date. And it's on all podcast platforms. And don't forget as well, if you Google Signpost Series webinars and Teagasc, you can watch them again as well, as much as you want. Okay, sir, I think that looks good. We're good to go. So we'll let you do your magic.
Thank you so much, Cathal. Throughout the presentation, I'll highlight lots of examples on biodiversity-friendly habitats and what good looks like. I suppose my role is, as I mentioned, is a biodiversity research officer in Teagasc. And in that role, I have a key message that I'd like to disseminate, and that's that biodiversity is an important national resource. And my research goal is to contribute to evidence-based research to enhance farmland biodiversity and to help farmers measure the benefits of biodiversity on the farm. And these benefits can be economic, social, and environmental. And my passion for biodiversity stems from my passion for plants and my interest in plant and animal interactions. And I'll refer to pollinators quite frequently because my background is in pollinator ecology. But I'm also interested in high diverse landscape features and the ecosystem services that they provide, as well as traditional farming methods, and perhaps most importantly, the farmers themselves. And I want to work with farmers to learn from them so that my research can help support the work that they do. So before I get into the 7 steps of my presentation, I'll give a brief introduction to my role in Teagasc, so what it is I do, so that everybody might have an understanding of it. I'll give some really basic background into what biodiversity is, why should we value it, the benefits, as well as the status and threats, and how we can work together to help biodiversity. And again, throughout the presentation, it is all focused around what does good look like. So my role as biodiversity researcher in Teagasc, it reflects the mandates of Teagasc. So the National Biodiversity Action Plan, the Farm to Fork Strategy, The EU biodiversity strategy, as well as the nature restoration law, are all linked and feed into my research. And a really important part of research is publishing your findings through knowledge transfer. But you need to find different ways of sharing that information. So by attending farm walks and events and working with other stakeholders, you can maximize the impact of your research. The Teagasc Advisory Service is an excellent vehicle that can facilitate this knowledge transfer. And I have worked with, and I'm continuing to work with, the Signpost programme on farmland biodiversity. And there's a number of internal working groups in Teagasc that is working towards enhancing biodiversity as well. But scientific research and peer-reviewed publications are the foundations of all this work, and it's not possible to produce these publications without the funding received through the submission of research proposals. So I'm currently involved in a number of projects that have been funded, and I'd like to briefly mention a few of them just in the next few slides. Excuse me, sorry, thank you. So Farm BioNet is a farmer-focused agricultural and biodiversity knowledge network, and it aims to enhance biodiversity-friendly farming practices in Europe by stimulating knowledge exchange between farmers, foresters, researchers, advisors, policymakers, and other key stakeholders. So we will achieve this through the creation of a thematic network. And within that thematic network, we have a number of national networks. These national networks are specifically on farming and biodiversity. And in Ireland, we're currently recruiting members to our national network. And you don't need to know about biodiversity to join the network, but if you would like to learn more in the area, you're very welcome to join. We're working with 19 different organizations from 13 different countries, and we're aiming to link farm type to practice and the incentives surrounding them. We'll conduct a cost-benefit analysis and create 2 easy-to-use tools, a navigator and a calculator. And if you'd like to find out more, you can email farmbionet@teagasc.ie. The SAFER project is strengthening agricultural landscape multifunctionality through the expansion of agroecological farming in Europe. And again, this is a European-wide project, and we've got some lead partners in Ireland. And we want to conduct multiple ecosystem service analysis on the farm. So looking at pest control, earthworm counts, pollination services, crop yield, soil fertility, total organic carbon, and how they're all related. So identifying these multiple benefits of biodiversity on the farm. I'm also involved in the Ground Truth project, which aims to increase public awareness and enhance soil literacy. We want to deepen the understanding of soil's health significance. And we're targeting farmers, secondary school students, and citizens to engage with citizen science and actually conduct experiments on their own land or in their own schools. So we're looking for citizens to conduct earthworm counts, underwear degradation tests, soil health analysis, as well as fit counts. So fit counts are flower insect timed counts. This is managed by the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And here we're hoping to show the links between above and below ground biodiversity. If you're interested in finding more about Ground Truth, you can email groundtruth@teagasc.ie and keep an eye out for Soil Health Week in September. We're hoping it'll be a nice week of engagement and learning about soil. The RESPOL project is restoring pollinator habitats across European agricultural landscapes. It's a European project that is coordinated by the University of Freiburg, and Trinity College Dublin are the leads of this in Ireland. And I'm an advisor on this project. In October, Ponds for Pollinators PhD will start, and I'll be recruiting a PhD student to work on this. So we want to investigate the benefits of ponds for biodiversity enhancement, to get information on feeding and nesting behaviour of pollinators, and to also assess farmer attitudes towards and knowledge of biodiversity. And this will hopefully help us identify the barriers, enablers, opportunities, and constraints for biodiversity protection in agricultural areas? I just see the poll has gone up there. Thank you so much. If you don't mind just clicking.
Apologies for delay, Saorla.
Not
Slow
at all.
fingered.
No, thanks. That's perfect. So moving into what is biodiversity. So when we talk about delivering biodiversity in agricultural land, we're talking about all the different types of plants, animals, and microorganisms that live there, as well as the range of habitats. So my interest and expertise is on pollinators, and that is why I refer to them so frequently, and I will throughout the presentation. But you can exchange the word pollinator for biodiversity in many instances. So biodiversity does not just include the diversity of species, but it's also the diversity and resilience of ecosystems, as well as the genetic variation within them. And Ireland has approximately 31,500 species living within 117 habitats. And our biodiversity is a very important national resource. And biodiversity can mean different things to different people. And this is a video that I worked with a group of farmers in my previous role that we put up, and it's available, and you can use the link, or I also included a QR code here. And the question was asked, what does biodiversity mean to you? And you got lots of different answers from different farmers. And Edward Wilson describes it quite well in The Diversity of Life. So biodiversity is the assembly of life that took 1 billion years to evolve. It has eaten the storms, folded them into its genes, and created the world that created us. It holds the word steady. And I just want you to remember that word steady, because it's really important. So again, I mentioned there's 3 aspects of biodiversity. You've got the species richness, ecosystem complexity, and genetic variation. And I use the bumblebee as an example, or the Irish bumblebees. So our species richness is the number of different species. So in Ireland, we have 21 different species of bumblebee. When you look at ecosystem complexity, so the great yellow bumblebee is one of our rare bumblebees. It used to be found throughout the island of Ireland. But now, unfortunately, it's only found in a few populations on the west coast. So the resilience of the ecosystem in which this bumblebee relies on has declined, and therefore it's now no longer found in the populations it used to be. And when you can talk about genetic variation, so the buff-tailed bumblebee, it has off-white or a buff-tail color. So they're kind of yellow hairs on the bum, essentially. But you also have a white-tailed bumblebee, and it has white hairs on the bum. But sometimes there can be genetic variation between them. And the buff-tailed might have white hairs, or the white-tailed might have off-white colored hairs. And in order to identify what this species is when it's a worker, you need to conduct a genetic analysis. I just wanted to highlight that the majority of our bees in Ireland are solitary bees. And solitary bees are split into 2 categories. We have cavity nesters, which we have 15, and we also have miners. So cavity nesters, or mason bees, they like to nest in holes in walls or wood. And miners, they mine underground, just like we do when we mine for coal. The thing about these bees is that they can't travel very far for food. So if they have a nesting habitat, they need to have a food source within 300 meters. And this is something that I like you to think of throughout the presentation, because it really does show the importance of connectivity in the landscape. So we can provide these routes for biodiversity to travel throughout the landscape so that they can continue to breed and survive. So what are the benefits to biodiversity? And I've added this picture here. So this is some haystacks in Romania. When I was a child, which is getting longer and longer since, there's pictures of me and the different traditional haystacks that we'd have in Ireland. They would be much smaller than this, probably because of our high rainfall. Our hay would never dry if we made them this big. But the benefits of But what the benefits of biodiversity is also the heritage of our biodiversity and the heritage of how we've managed the landscape. So tradition is very important. Traditional methods are beneficial to biodiversity, but also they're part of our national heritage. And tradition, I found this quote that tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire. So the previous quote mentioned, so here we have preservation and we have stability. So these are really important words for us going forward to ensure the sustainability of agriculture. So biodiversity has many benefits for farming. Crop diversity provides resilience in the face of change. So having different varieties can reduce vulnerability to weather events or disease. Diversity of insectivorous birds, bats, and other predatory invertebrates, beetles, wasps, and spiders, they can keep potential insect pest populations under control. Having a diversity of insects can increase seed and fruit yields in entomophilous crops. Having a diversity of life in the soil keeps it healthy. Fungal partners of plants allow atmospheric nutrients to be converted from the plants that can use so that less fertilizer is needed. So if we're applying less fertilizer on the farm, the farmer can save money. Having a diversity of life in our waterways keep them clean and contribute to local hydrological processes. The diversity of habitats on farms contributes to maintaining microclimates, shelter for livestock, drainage, and provides places for all the different creatures to live and breed. So biodiversity benefits farming in different ways, but it also can help animal welfare. Looking at the graphs here on the left, you can see that the more species delivers more pollination and pest control in farmland. And these are really clear positive relationships between service and species diversity across hundreds of sampling points. And if those species are more different from each other, so if you have functional diversity, this can also increase yields across a range of crop types. But animal pollination or biodiversity can also improve the quantity and quality of yields. And the strawberry is an excellent example of this. So the strawberry on the left is open pollination. So it's pollinated by insects as well as the wind. Strawberry in the middle is excluded from pollination. So it's self-pollinated. And the one on the right is wind and self-pollinated. So pollinators are excluded from reaching the flower. So clearly the one that's pollinated by insects or the open pollinated strawberry is the one that we want, that we desire, and the one that we will buy in the shops. But sometimes if you're growing strawberries in your back garden, you might see these other ones. So it's a sign that there's more pollinators are required. Again, biodiversity and pollinators can improve the shelf life as well as the nutritional quality and economic income of our crops. But biodiversity on farmland has wider benefits. Woody plants sequester and store carbon, contributing to global climate regulation. Farmland provides habitats for creatures, even if they're not needed for crop production. 87% of our wild plant species require pollinators for reproduction. Diversity on farms contributes to the aesthetic and cultural value of our landscape, which is very important for our health and well-being, as well as recreation and our tourism industry. And biodiversity on farmland contributes to maintaining our biodiversity at a national level. Creating habitats for wildlife. I go back to this example time and time again, and this is a solitary bee mining nest site that's created by livestock. So livestock simply have a scratch to itch, and when they rub up against the bank or a hedge that's unfenced, they create this bare soil habitat, which allows mining bees to create nest sites. So they mine into the bank and lay their eggs in the tunnels that they create. So if you look closer, you can see the small little holes created by the solitary mining bees. And again, remember, most of our bee species in Ireland are miners. And it really is a great example of how farming and biodiversity can work together. So just in terms of cultural values, the Burren Winterage Festival, if you haven't attended yet, I'd highly recommend it. So this picture is taken from the festival last year. And last year, 700 people came together to walk 25 cattle up to the winterage. And this is a tradition that's thousands of years old, and not just in Ireland, but worldwide. And the festival is a celebration of farmers and farming, and it really highlights how important farming is to our heritage, to our food security, and to our landscape. We also have breeds in Ireland, and these breeds are also part of our national heritage. It's always wonderful to see all the different types of animals that we use from farming. And there's an interesting project called Safeguard. Again, it's a European project where it's looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and how biodiversity or pollinators contribute to these goals. And pollinators contribute to 7 out of 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and 11 of the 17 goals, directly impact pollinators. Pollinators play a critical role in life on land and zero hunger, and they're also linked to 58 of the 169 Sustainable Development Goal targets across 14 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And these are just some of the examples, some of the evidence-based examples that showcase this. So biodiversity has many benefits to farming, farmland, society, and the sustainable development. So why should we value it? Well, I'm passionate about the protection of biodiversity, and I enjoy seeing the natural world thriving. But there are added benefits of protecting biodiversity, and I'm sure everybody can find something and one added benefit. So coffee and cacao are important crops to economic trade, and they require pollinators for production. The chocolate flower has a tiny little midge that pollinates it, and children are always so fascinated to see this happening. Mulled wine and mince pies and cream are such a treat at Christmas time. But the cows need plants to eat or grass. So the plants could be grass, clover, mixed species sward, or permanent pasture. The joy on this child's face the first time she saw a dragonfly. So with declining species, we are at risk of losing these benefits and these added benefits. And there's different ways that we can value biodiversity. But in our current system, we look at the total economic value. And these can be the use value. So the direct derived products that come out of what we get from biodiversity. So the chocolate, for example. But we also have indirect values contributing to ecosystem service functioning. There's also the non-use values. So the option value, the future potential of a site. And this comes into play if you were considering putting forestry in an existing grassland or an existing arable field. The existence value, so the satisfaction of knowing that they're there. And I get great satisfaction of seeing the increasing number of bee species in my garden every year since I've bought my house. But we also have a bequest value. So this is a moral value. So the benefits for future generations, that they have the same access to everything that we have. Biodiversity has significant benefit to business. And it was estimated by the World Economic Forum that approximately $44 trillion of economic value is at moderate or severe risk due to nature loss. And biodiversity loss has negative implication to our financial systems, our food systems, ecosystems, agricultural systems, as well as our health and well-being. And this is worldwide. So despite all of these benefits of biodiversity and how valuable it is to society, the status does not look great. So from 1970 to 2020, we have seen a 70% decline in biodiversity. So these are biodiversity stripes, and they provide a visual representation of the change in biodiversity over time. And I think it's a nice way you can see it. So you can see the stripes with or without the birds. So the highest level of biodiversity is colored bright green on the left, and the lower levels move through to yellow and grey, depending upon the level of decline. So you can see the darker greys on the right appear with greater declines. So perhaps you're not familiar with the biodiversity stripes, but there's also the global temperature stripes. And I want to highlight that climate and biodiversity are intimately related and need not be tackled in isolation. The stripes for the climate stripes turn from mainly blue to mainly red in more recent years, illustrating the rise in average temperatures. So you can see how they're quite similar in the way that they transition over time, the red and the grey, the blue and the green. So our wildlife has declined. And here we can see a rapid decline from 1970 to 2016. And despite this continuous decline, there are still 1 million species threatened with extinction. And a number of species have gone extinct in my lifetime. And we need to really try and prevent this from happening even further. So the current state of biodiversity on much of Irish agricultural land is not good. So according to the latest reports to the EU, 1/3 of our species and 89% of habitats that are protected under European nature directives are in unfavourable state. So these are two publications that were produced by the National Parks and Wildlife Services and submitted to the EU. So we have a habitats assessment and a species assessment. So the graph shows two donuts. So there's the donut on the outside, which represents the habitats, and then the donut on the inside represents the species. According to the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland, more than half of Irish native plant species have declined in range and abundance, or both. Native grassland plants are those that have suffered the most, and this seems odd given that most of Ireland is covered in grassland, but that grassland is highly managed. And the way it's managed, it can only maintain a very low number of species. According to Birdwatch Ireland, most Irish bird species are in decline, and farmland birds like the curlew, the lapwing, the snipe, and the kestrel, they're the group that are seeing the most rapid deterioration. And this is because of the loss of habitats, the reduction in diversity of cropping systems, and the loss of traditional management, as well as increase in agrochemical use. So this graphic is taken from a report published by the European Court of Auditors, and it can just show that the simplification of the structure of the environment has replaced nature's diversity with a small number of cultivated plants and domesticated animals. So the more diverse your landscape with semi-natural habitats, the more species you'll have. Genetically, we're dependent on a very low number of varieties of major crops, and we need to get biodiversity back into these landscapes because this diversity is very important for many reasons. Nature has introduced great variety into the landscape, but we have displayed a passion for simplifying it. This is a quote taken from a book published in 1962. And up until the 1980s, agriculture in Ireland was much less intensive. And this was mainly due to the widespread meadows, which were particularly biodiversity friendly. It's not about returning to that, but it's about identifying actions that can be implemented and that can work with farming. A biodiversity crisis in Ireland was announced in 2019. And this is not new information. We've known about this decline and the threats of biodiversity loss for years. So the main direct drivers of biodiversity loss, according to the International Panel of IBIS, are changes in land use, direct exploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive alien species. But we are working to protect biodiversity, both nationally and internationally. And I had the pleasure of working with an amazing group of farmers on the Protecting Farmland Pollinators project and the Farmer Moth Monitoring project. And these were both European Innovation Partnership projects, or EIP Agri. And there's a number of these EIP projects that have been so beneficial across Ireland and really did work to identify real solutions on the ground that worked for farmers and that were developed by farmers. There's so many projects that I couldn't include them all, but a few weeks ago, Caroline Lawler presented the Farm Peat project, and it's worth going back and watching her presentation. It was excellent. And I really am a big fan of the Love Your Wellies competition. I think a lot of the inspiration for these EIP projects came from the Burren programme. And what they've managed to achieve in the Burren is exceptional. It's about really valuing farmers, farmland, and the contributions and the importance of farming for biodiversity. And the Farming for Nature initiative is now not only working nationally, but internationally. There's different Farming for Natures popping up in different countries all over Europe. But with the Protecting Farmland Pollinators EIP, an evidence-based scorecard was developed. And the farms that had higher pollinator points had higher abundance and species richness of pollinators. And this relationship was statistically significant for different pollinator groups. So the scorecard really showed farmers how pollinator friendly their farm was and what low-cost actions could be taken to improve their score if they wanted to do so. And it's not just farmers that are working to protect biodiversity. There's lots of different organisations in Ireland, and you can find out more if you're interested. So the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and I apologise for the text-heavy slide. I didn't have time to work on it, but the National Biodiversity Data Centre, they map and record and disseminate all information on biodiversity across Ireland. The Department of Agriculture are funding the National Pollinator Monitoring Scheme, which is vital under the Nature Restoration Law. County councils are all employed biodiversity officers, as well as the Heritage Council. The MPWS manage farm plans, and they also have the Lighthouse Farms, which I'd recommend checking out because it's really positive case studies of actions that work on the ground. But universities and businesses have now created positions for climate and biodiversity vice presidents in their institutions. And this is bringing somebody in at a very senior level that can ensure that biodiversity is considered at all levels throughout different institutions. And it was about 10 years ago where DCU was the first university in Ireland to create a sustainability manager at a senior level. And this is something that is, we've moved even further from sustainability to actually create a position for biodiversity and climate. The All-Ireland Pollinator Plan has a number of actions for farmland. Again, if you want to find out more. And the Farming for Nature ambassadors are really the champions of biodiversity and farmland. And they are showcasing how highly productive system can work with nature. And lastly, in Teagasc, we're coordinating the Farming and Biodiversity National Network. And I just want to highlight all the different institutions, organisations and businesses that have shown their support. And the tractor represents all the farmers that are contributing to the project and to the national network. I need to find a logo for farmers. And just wanted to mention the EIP Agri. So in Ireland, we had these EIP projects, and there's a few new ones that are going to start this year. But Ireland is just one example, and there's a lot of information available in lots of different European countries that can be beneficial for us in Ireland. And there's a project database, and I've just added in the link there, but you can Google EIP Agri project database to find out more information. So over 4,000 projects. You can then simplify your search to look for biodiversity related projects or pollinator projects. But there's a range of different projects. You can see here, I've just shown an example of arable farmers working together to reduce emissions. And this is something that's ongoing in the Netherlands at the moment. So it's a great source of information to find out information for you. And it's managed by the EU CAP network. And the EU CAP network organise a number of events. And for each event, they have a publication. And I've been very fortunate to work with the UCAP network on promoting pollinator-friendly farming through a workshop, as well as enhancing biodiversity in farmland through high diversity landscape features with a focus group. And upcoming next month, there's an on-farm demonstration for peer-to-peer learning and innovation. So what does good look like? Flowering hedgerows, flowering fields, flowering non-farmed areas, but also fruiting hedgerows and fields with seeds. Diversity is key. So having a hawthorn in flower now, but if you were 3 weeks ago, your blackthorn was in flower, the willow as well. And willow is a very important tree. It produces quite a lot of pollen, which is used by solitary bees to feed their young, used by all bees. But connectivity in the landscape. And again, bringing you back to the solitary bee example, a solitary bee can only fly up to 200 or 300 meters. So we need a habitat or flowers for them every 200 or 300 meters in the landscape. So how can we identify where we can work on that? So just having a look here, this is an image taken from outside an airplane window, and you can see there's a number of fields and there's lots of different biodiversity habitats here. But if you look here, sorry, I'm just going to put my laser pointer on here. So this field here is quite large. Now it may not be suitable to do, but it's something that could be considered. So in Ireland, we plant hedgerows to connect to different landscapes. But in France or Germany, they make these little islands. So perhaps the island approach might work in this scenario. And I suppose it's about considering what could work and maybe experimenting on something on your farm to try to enhance biodiversity. Last month, I was driving down the road and I took this picture. It's an amazing blackthorn and flower. And hedgerows are really vital for maintaining farmland biodiversity. They provide food, safety, and shelter, and act as important roadways. And that allows many species to travel throughout the countryside. And good quality hedgerows can provide food, pollen, nectar, fruits, berries, places to breed, places to nest, and somewhere safe over winter. So corridors to travel across the landscape, they are so important. Connecting a new hedge with an existing linear feature can make it easier for species to travel. So if you look closer at this hedge, you can see there are thousands of flowers flowering there. And then a few meters down the road, there was another hedge. So you can just take a closer look that this hedge has been cut. Now, this is providing habitat for biodiversity, but perhaps the other hedge is providing more habitats. And every farm in the country is providing a service to biodiversity. And every farmer, whether they realize it or not, have taken action to help biodiversity. Every tree you've planted has been an action for biodiversity. So is there a way that we can enhance biodiversity on the farm? So this is a hedge in the background that's also being cut quite short. And here's another one. So here you can just see on these two fields, there's actually 4 hedges that have been cut quite severely. Maybe could consider cutting one less severely this year. And maybe if that works, you might be able to do a bit more next year. We all need to do a little bit more. And again, the Protecting Farmland Pollinators farmers, they created these solitary bee nest sites on the farm. And within a few months, they were already occupied. So the one on the left, this picture was taken by Mairead McCall. And you can just see that the holes for the cavity bees were covered by leaves. So this is actually occupied by the leaf cutter bee. And you can actually see the leaf here has been cut off. So the bee cut a part of the leaf on the rose and covered after the eggs had been laid. And with the farmers, we produced an action sheet on how to provide suitable habitats for ground nesting and cavity nesting bees on farmland. And I've the link there and the QR code, and these slides will be put up afterwards within a few days after this presentation. So when it comes to managing farmland biodiversity, we need to identify what's there, maintain and retain it, and enhance, diversify, and connect, and create where there are a few that exist. But when creating habitat for biodiversity, it is important that we do not destroy an existing habitat. And the Farming for Nature Handbook provides all the information you need to enhance or manage biodiversity on the farm. There are resources with the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And at the moment, the National Biodiversity Data Centre are running the Festival of Farmland Biodiversity, which is the month of May. It's a virtual festival, but there's a hedgerow photo competition that I'd recommend you get involved with. You can win a pair of binoculars. The Farming for Nature have a number of farm walks ongoing annually that anybody can attend to find out more. So you can see best practice in real life and then hopefully implement that back on your farm. Base Ireland also have another number of walks. And again, they're an excellent organisation that really do showcase best practices for biodiversity. So these are just some simple actions.
Sorry, just nearly out of time, just to remind you.
Yeah, I know, this is it now, we're nearly there. Creating nesting sites, planting native trees, avoiding herbicides and fertilizer under hedges, allowing hedges and margins to flower, identifying and protecting species richness. But having these targets or actions or frameworks is only useful, if they are implementable. So we need to work with lots of different stakeholders in order to achieve that. And the Farm BioNet project is doing just that. So you can find out more by visiting farmbionet.ie.eu or email farmbionet@teagasc.ie. And I just want to, again, highlight that flowering hedgerows are kind of an easy win for enhancing biodiversity on the farm. But flowering hedgerows with flowering margins can nearly double your efforts. Dig a pond. Every farm in the country used to have a pond, and ponds provide habitats for many different species. And if you want some inspiration on why to dig a pond on the farm, I recommend you listen to Anthony Mooney's interview on the lyric feature, Feather and Flock. But also species-rich grasslands and flowering permanent pasture. So in this picture, the flowering permanent pastures is a cuckoo flower or a lady's smock, which is this one here. And many farms in the country have this. And this plant is a host plant to the orange-tip butterfly who lays its eggs on this plant. And if you go out to the field and you see a small little orange ball, that's the egg of the orange-tip butterfly. So by allowing these plants to grow and flower, you are providing a habitat for a beautiful butterfly species. So, Gurv Mahagav.
That's excellent, Saorla. Thank you so much. Sorry, my camera's not working here for some reason, but that was really, really good. And I know you apologize for text-heavy slides, but like the visuals were really, really good. So well done on that. And I suppose one question I would have, and Catherine, I'll go to you quick because I know there's plenty of questions coming in, but like the slide you put up when you're comparing the greenhouse gas slide, the global warming slide, and you had the biodiversity one. I know you mentioned 73% declines from 1970 to 2020, which is really worrying. Are we to that level in Ireland? And the second part of that question maybe is there some sort of a slowdown in that? Are we starting to improve a bit or slow that decline, I suppose, is my question.
I suppose, unfortunately, we're not slowing the decline. Now, we have data on lots of different species and lots of different groups of species, but that figure is a global figure and it does include Ireland in it. And like as you're driving down the road, you can see for yourself where biodiversity habitats are continuously disappearing. And I know just from myself where there's these beautiful fields where there might have been horses grazing are now housing estates. So we are continuously removing habitats that are in existence. And those habitats, the ones that are there already, they took hundreds of years to develop. And it's not like you can just put a new one in. It's not going to have the same amount of benefits.
And just to follow up that, I suppose, just when you mentioned about houses and developments and all that, with better science and we're living longer, there's an explosion of population. Is that going to be a problem down the line then? Room for everybody?
So there are guidelines on how to create these developments and maintaining biodiversity. And the All Ireland Pollinator Plan have the guidelines for pollinators and new housing developments, but it's about people actually using them. So, it's up to organizations to embed them in their works. And I suppose there's more and more legislation coming down the lines, and that has been implemented in the last years for businesses, that they must take biodiversity into account in all their actions. And again, we're creating more and more awareness about the importance of it. But I suppose it's probably taking too long for those things to happen on the ground. So we need to kind of act a little bit faster. But just in terms of the species, there's so many communities that are working towards helping bees, for example. And just one positive story is the large carder bee. So a lot of farmers are working at providing habitats and enhancing connectivity in different communities. And we're seeing increased populations of the large carder bee. So they can be very species specific. But again, at a national scale, it doesn't look good, unfortunately.
Catherine, a few questions coming in there, plenty.
Just first of all, say super presentation, Saorla, with fantastic facts that people like me would find very useful to when we're trying to make our arguments and encourage people. And just one thing I'd add to your group of working to help biodiversity is the 800 FOSS advisors, Teagasc and others who are out, scoring the fields and talking about biodiversity and a critical group, I think, to change practice. Now, just a couple of quick ones, Saorla, that may be helpful. Again, can different stakeholders join the Farm Bionet project, like companies or impact organisations? It's not just farmers, sure it's not.
No, it's for all different organisations, and we have industry involved, and we've got great support from policymakers and different ministries. So we have representatives from 3 different ministries.
Brilliant. Anyone can join. We've loads of questions, Saorla, and I'd love to get your opinion on a lot of them. Just a few other quick ones. Are the figures and graphics with the stripes data from Ireland or international?
That's global. That's worldwide data.
Lovely. Sorry. There was one question there about are there too many groups working on biodiversity, duplication and overlaps? Are all these groups after money with limited end products? Are all these projects being coordinated and are the subject to monitoring? Question for us all, I suppose, Saorla, but what's your comment?
I think that's an excellent point. Yeah. And again, it's looking at a farmer's or an advisor's time, and you have 10 different biodiversity projects trying to get a point across. So with Farm Bionet, we are working with other projects to ensure that we're not duplicating time and we're not duplicating any of our efforts, but to also strengthen our efforts as well. And there's definitely not enough projects on biodiversity happening. We need more. Obviously, I'm biased.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. As a beekeeper, I wonder, are there incentives to? Sorry, but that was two ones on bees there. I wonder, are there incentives to encourage farmers to replace silage cutting fields with old style grass and hay fields? And there was a related question there about how long it would take an intensively managed, high nutrient field to come back.
Okay, so the 2 questions. The first one about incentives or about potential payments for these meadows, and they're coming down the line, but there's the Refarm project, which is ongoing, where they're looking at paying farmers to maintain these habitats. And this is something that we have identified through the Protecting Farmland and Pollinators project, is that farmers are providing these services, and it's not just the Protecting Farmland and Pollinators project that identified this. So farmers are providing these free services, and perhaps they should be rewarded for it because they are very important. So the Refarm project are trying to do just that. And then
how long, I suppose?
How long, yeah. So this would be very specific to soil type, location, climate. I had a lawn that was mowed every year, and it was a manicured lawn, and this was perfect. Like, there wasn't a weed. There might have been a few dandelions that would have been sprayed off, I didn't spray them. But when I started to manage the lawn, the number of species, I didn't sow anything in it. I just reduced the mowing and didn't apply any grass feed. So
I
the
suppose,
number,
Sarah, the question there, that lawn was probably not high for index 4 P and K and limed. Would I be correct?
yes, but it would have been like very close to a field that would have been. So there definitely would have been runoff. So it was like the garden in the farm, you know, and it was at a low point. But it was very interesting to see the species richness increase over time. And within 5 years, there was orchids growing in it. So it all depends on what management practices are happening. But again, time and time again, if you want to enhance biodiversity in a field, so have more flowers growing, it's not necessarily about sowing seed. It's about allowing the seed that's already in the soil to germinate and just giving it the right conditions to do so.
And I presume the past history of that soil then with the P and K. Now, another one linked to bees on the opposite side, Saorla. Why is hive beekeeping not being discouraged? They denude huge areas of pollen and nectar, leaving solitary bees to starve. Any comment?
Maybe that person doesn't like honey. I love honey, and beekeeping is an important industry in Ireland, and it does support the livelihoods of many people. So, you know, it's about finding a balance. We can't get rid of all the honeybees. They also are providing a service as well. And depending on the crop, so apples, honeybees are important pollinators of apples. Again, it's about, you know, having a balance. So ensuring where those hives are placed, that they're not out competing our solitary bees. And I hope to do some research on that. And Dara and Stanley did some research that was published recently on the competition effect of honeybees on our solitary bees.
Okay, just flying through a few more, Sarah. Considering the red list of endangered plants and animals, could small or marginal farms be supported in rewilding and being sanctuaries for nature, especially red list plant species, financial support, not just moral? So abandonment, is that good?
Again, biodiversity does need to be managed on some level, and especially on the farm. And land abandonment can actually be a threat to biodiversity, and it is in some countries a great threat, like Romania, for example. Again, I think the Refarm project about, you know, providing financial rewards to farmers that are managing biodiversity like that, and small farms, it is discussed that they provide an even greater service for biodiversity than maybe larger farms can, because of their small size, they have smaller fields and greater connectivity.
So I suppose it depends whether you want scrub or if you need the species-rich grassland, it needs the grazing. You're the bee expert, Saorla. So you mentioned the great yellow bumblebee population has been reduced throughout the years in Ireland. What could be possible strategies to recover not only the numbers of bumblebees, but the genetic diversity of this species?
Very interesting question. So there's work ongoing through different projects for the great yellow bumblebee. So there was an EIP project on it. And then there's also the Life on Macar Life project. But in terms of enhancing the genetic diversity, I suppose before we can even consider doing that, we need to ensure that the populations increase. So again, you know, if you don't have many different species, you can't, or many different populations, you can't enhance the genetic diversity. And the All Ireland Pollinator Plan have guideline documents on the great yellow bumblebee and how to help it.
Listen, there's so many comments and applauses for your presentation, and I'm not going to get to anywhere near the questions. I'll hand over to you in a minute, in case you pick up any critical ones there, Cathal. Just one other one I see there that I know you may have a good idea of. Invasive species. Has the Asian hornet been recorded in Ireland? Serious predator of bees?
So I think there has been one recording of it or one citation of it, but I'd have to double check. It's not fresh in my mind right now. Sorry.
Yeah.
But it is a threat. It is a significant threat to our honeybee. And there is an ongoing program that's managed by the Department of Agriculture to keep track of it, and the number of beekeepers are doing it. But I'd have to double check. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine. And again, questions about your presentation, but not to reassure everyone, it will be there, both in the heart, in all the ways. Cathal, have you any particular one there that
Yeah,
I've missed? There's so many.
yeah, we're running a bit tight in time, but some really good
Yeah.
questions. I just come back to your poll. So there's
Oh yeah.
actually policymakers on here listening, right? So there's a question here. If you are a policymaker, what would you bring in that could create change?
Okay, so at the policy level.
Yeah, I know it's a tricky question. I normally say it's like if
Um,
you could wave a magic wand, what would you
if
do?
I could wave a magic wand, well, we've created this pollinator scorecard that's easy to use. That was developed with farmers. It's something that could be put on the ground. It's implementable. It's ready to go. So if every farm in the country could complete this scorecard and be incentivized to do so, they'll get a kind of percentage mark. So if your mark is 60%, your farm is managing biodiversity. If your mark is, and again, these figures will be determined and it will be produced or put, the scorecard hasn't been published yet and it will be published at a later date. But if you receive a mark of, for example, 75%, you're managing your farm very well for pollinators. So this scorecard is a way that we can identify baseline figures for all farms across the country and then provide actions that can be implemented to enhance those scores.
And just, I know we're nearly done, but just when you talk about scorecards and getting out in farms, it's very resource heavy. And Catherine mentioned we have a lot of good advisory going out there and doing that kind of work at the moment. But if you look at the likes of the ASSA program, who have specific advisors that go out and target water quality alone, advisors for that, is there maybe a need for that in biodiversity as well, considering a crisis was announced?
Definitely. It would be wonderful to see more biodiversity expertise in the advisory service. And if there's an advisor anywhere that is interested in learning more about biodiversity, please join the national network or get in touch. I would be delighted to work with them and help in any way I can.
And Catherine, a lot of advisors are learning the last couple of years very well on looking at species and stuff and different flowers, aren't they?
Oh, I think there's huge
Yeah,
experience already there, and I
yeah,
mean they're the people the farmers listen to. So the issue I suppose is the time, Cathal. There's a lot of pressures on doing multi jobs. They
yeah,
could they can work wonders if that is their role, their
yeah.
key role. Yeah.
And one last question, we'll wrap up then because we're
Yeah.
out of time. But has there been any on-farm research, Saorla, to show the relationship between biodiversity, habitat value, and maybe stocking rate? So is there stocking rate above where the negative impact on biodiversity, I suppose, I suppose that relationship between stocking rate and biodiversity?
Yes, so there is research on that. I can't think of the authors right now off the top of my head, but what they have shown is that it is site specific and can be soil specific and climate specific. So this is across Europe, but even within Ireland, it would be very location specific on what stocking rate your land can carry. And again, the farmers, they have the best information because they really know what their land can carry, and they'd know what would work for them. So again, making sure that their voice is heard is vital to ensuring biodiversity on farmland is enhanced.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap up because yeah, the landowners are the key to unlocking everything, and everybody working together is really what's going to help us out. So once the information is on the ground and this is part of it, and the next step then is implementation and try and keep that rolling and hopefully change that graph that you showed us to a more positive light, maybe in a number of years. So with that, I suppose, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. And I'd just like to thank everybody for submitting all their questions. Some excellent questions, and apologies we didn't get through them all. And Saorla, thanks a million. That was a really interesting presentation. I really enjoyed that one. And Catherine, also to you, thanks a million for your expertise on the questions. It's always hugely helpful. And thanks a million to Yvonne Maher in the background, who's always making sure that the webinars run smoothly and manages everything for us. And just to let you know, next week, don't forget 9:30, we're back again next Friday, and we have Teagasc researcher Dr. James Humphreys is going to join us on the webinar to talk about managing clover to lower carbon and ammonia emissions. So that's not to be missed either. So with that, I suppose, just do tune in again next week. And with that, maybe hope you have a lovely weekend. Enjoy the sunshine, plenty of barbecues. And with that, slán go fóill.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.